only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's Friday, so it's Good News Friday. We love you joining us on Friday, and I particularly enjoy Fridays because I guess I'm human. I need some positive, uplifting information, and it's always good to know that there's not only big victories out there that are happening, but there's little victories all across the country in so many different ways because people get involved, and our system works when we work it. So, David Barton, give me some good news.
Well, let's start with Texas. That's good news all by itself. I know. We're homers.
Just the mention of Texas is good news.
We're homers. I admit it. Okay. It's a national program, but we're homers. With Texas, we are obviously the second largest state. I say obviously. Some people may not know that. We are the second largest state in the United States. We have grown so rapidly that in the last redistricting, we actually picked up 4 congressional seats. No other state picked up more than 2. So we're growing at a super rapid rate. It takes about 700,000 for each congressional district. So, we increased nationally several million in the last 10 years. There was a period of time when 7 out of every 10 jobs were being produced here in Texas. So we have done really, really well here. But
and David, if I could just say to our listeners outside of Texas, what all that means is if you're a God-fearing, America-loving, patriotic, conservative American, and you want a great place to live, this is the place. If you are an America hater, liberal-minded, more government, less individualism, less free enterprise type person, then the growth here is outrageous. You wouldn't want to be here. It's too crowded.
And we say that, but these guys on the other side are really good missionaries. They are sending their folks in large numbers in Texas to try to take it back in an opposite direction. They still are very active on our college campuses here. We have our share of liberals and plenty more. We would love to send them to any state that would want some more liberals. We'll be happy to send them to you. We still have, as does any state, anywhere you have a college town or a state capital, you will have much more liberal politics than that. So we've got our share of crummy stuff, not the least of which is a state this big with this much population. There are a ton of abortion clinics. As a matter of fact, do you know how many abortion clinics we have in Texas?
Man, no idea.
44 abortion clinics here in Texas. And as you can imagine, we've got a lot of, I think we have 3 or 4 of the nation's 10 largest cities. You get into San Antonio and Houston and that type of stuff. So there's plenty of abortion clinics go around. By the way, let me change that. 2 years ago, there were 44 abortion clinics in Texas. Do you know how many we have now?
I don't. I know some have closed, so I'm hoping it's a lot less, not more.
Yeah, there's a few that have closed, and they are working very hard with movements like Turn Texas Blue and whatnot, and those are liberal progressives. They are pro-abortion, and they're trying their best to do stuff here. Well, 2 years ago, we had 44 abortion clinics in Texas. We have 8 now. So
wow.
We are down to 8. So we're talking about an 85% reduction in abortion clinics in Texas. And to be able to do that in a state of this size and this caliber, that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. And I don't think we've heard the national news talking about that all that much. But that's indicative of what's going on across the country. But Texas is a great example because a lot of times where you have a lot of economic prosperity, morals can go down the tubes. People put economics above morality. Well, not so in Texas. We're maintaining our prosperity and our economics along with our morality. And so that's what's happening in Texas.
Man, that is fantastic news. Those numbers are actually kind of staggering. I mean, if you think about it, if you were in any other business, and that's what it is to them, it's, killing babies is a moneymaker for them. If you were in any other quote-unquote business and you had 44, franchises out there and you had to close 6 of them and drop down to 8, those guys got to be a little bit upset, and I'm actually thankful. That's a good group to be upset because they're losing quote business and there are fewer babies being lost in Texas.
Well, you can understand, too, why that they rely so much on government money at times like this, and why President Obama is helping them, and that he wants funds for them, wants increased funding for them. They're trying to remake themselves as a sex education organization, so the states need to pay us for teaching sex education, etc. They're working really hard to keep their money up. That's why they are suing states that are defunding Planned Parenthood, because in addition to not being able to fulfill a market desire, and that is for more abortions because people just aren't doing it and states are shutting it down, you also have the difficulty with how do we keep ourselves funded. And it had been very much, was it 1/3 or 2/3 of their funding? I forget now the numbers, but a huge amount was government money. And now that that's being shut down, not only their clinics being shut down, but even their government money is being shut down. And so it is a really tough and a really diminishing industry, which is interesting because it seems like the reaction to that, and maybe this explains what I've seen in the news recently, there's been so much more over-the-top rhetoric from pro-abortionists. I mean, the reaction to the Hobby Lobby decision, etc. I mean, maybe they literally on their side are seeing the end of abortion as they've known it because of states like Texas, states across the United States that have passed so many laws. This will be the 4th consecutive year in a row that state legislatures have broken record of what had been the previous record on the highs for state laws limiting abortion. And now we're looking at 4 years in a row of having broken that previous record that existed only one time in 30 years. Now we got 4 in a row. Maybe that explains why they're becoming so frantic. And people like Patty Murray in the U.S. Senate out of Washington State, why she introduced the bill that she did, and Blumenfeld out of Connecticut and others. Maybe, as I think about this story, maybe that explains why they're becoming a lot more frantic in their rhetoric, and the same with President Obama as well.
They're desperate. They're absolutely desperate, which is good, and that means more babies live. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. More good news for you when we return here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Revisions today often assert that our founding fathers were atheists or agnostics or deists. This charge is not new. In fact, Patrick Henry was even called a deist in his lifetime. Clearly, no one could question his patriotism, but Henry was hurt that they would question his Christianity. Against the charge that he was a deist, Patrick Henry thundered, "Deism, with me, is but another name for vice and depravity. I hear it is said by the deists that I am one of their number, and indeed, that some good people think I am no Christian. This thought gives me much more pain than being called a traitor. Being a Christian is a character which I prize far above all this world has or can boast." Patrick Henry was quick to refute the charge of deism and to declare his open belief as a Christian.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday, and we started our first segment with a little good news close to home for us anyway here in Texas. But actually, David, that what you were talking about in the closing of the abortion clinics, I mean, isn't that indicative of what's happening around the country? We're not the only state with good news on that issue. We've had a lot of pro-life good news on our Friday shows throughout this year.
We have, and you remember some of our Friday shows were just almost totally good news on pro-life issues. And that's really good. One of the things that we've documented at other times is that how you are on the life issue pretty much reflects how you do on all other issues. And if you're good on life, you'll be good on other inalienable rights. You'll be good on religious expressions. You'll be good on things like Second Amendment, self-defense. And we've talked about how that even after the Newtown tragedy, where 7 states moved to limit gun rights, 14 states moved to expand gun rights. So it has been a thing that as this pro-life stuff is growing, we're seeing pushbacks in so many other areas. You look at how many states were in the tank 4 years ago economically because of their pensions, everything else. And you get the Scott Walkers who come in and the Kasichs who come in and all these guys who come in so many states and turn those states, Snyder up in Michigan, turn them in different economic directions. I mean, you look at the rising waters that are going to states, not at the federal level. I mean, federal waters aren't rising at this point, but the states are. And it is interesting that as you get pro-life folks moving in a state and the state becomes more pro-life, their economics also go up as well as protection for individual liberties. And that's part of what we've been covering the last few months on Good News Fridays is good news from all of those arenas, not just the life arena.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, speaking of that, you have more pro-life, or are we moving to another subject?
Well, this is not necessarily directly related to pro-life, but it is the fact that the D.C. Court of Appeals here just a few weeks ago completely whacked the mainstay provision of Obamacare. And the reason that's significant is this is not just a Court of Appeals. This is the D.C. Court of Appeals. And that's where, in the D.C. Court of Appeals, that's where you take federal laws. So many other federal courts, they'll deal with civil rights, et cetera, but this deals with federal laws. And so it goes through the D.C. Court of Appeals, and while they upheld Obamacare originally as a tax, and then they struck down the part on the infanticide because of conscience protection, now they've gone after a major provision that says you cannot have federal subsidies. And that's the thing that Obama's really been selling this on is, hey, we can keep your insurance low. And the Court of Appeals struck down these subsidies, federal subsidies, where you have state exchanges. And so what that's going to do is now in the majority of these states where they have refused to participate in the federal exchange, it is going to send the cost of insurance through the roof. So a number of even Obama law professors say that they think that this spells the end of Obamacare, that increase in expense will not be tolerated by folks, and as a result, this will go down. Now, this is still going to go to the Supreme Court. One of the interesting things about the D.C. Court of Appeals is any time a federal law is struck down, it must be reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is going to get a full-on look at this thing and see what they want to do with it, if they want to take it up or not. But they have to review this decision and see where they're going to come down on it. So the state law, or the Obamacare law, interestingly, was really written with a lot of specifics in places. Other places, they had to read it to find out what was in it. But in this place, they said that these state exchanges, and they call them by name, state exchanges, that no federal subsidies there. And so because so many states have refused to participate in state exchanges, it has really crippled the field for the Obamacare bill. So it's interesting. It looks like this thing is still, although not repealable through Congress, it may go down under the weight of its own wording in its laws, and that's good news.
That's excellent news. It's almost like it's falling apart under its own weight.
It is.
It's almost like it's killing itself because there's so much there.
And I can't figure out why a bill with 2,500 pages would have anything in there of its own weight to kill itself.
Yeah, I bet you can. All right, quick break. We'll be back for some more good news here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, there are numerous documented accounts of individual students being disciplined simply for bringing a Bible to school. Fisher Ames would have been appalled at this open hostility toward the Bible. Fisher Ames was the founding father who authored the House of Representatives language for the First Amendment. In his day, he vehemently objected to any attempt to minimize the Bible at schools. In fact, he declared, "Why should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind." Founding Father Fisher Ames, the man most responsible for the wording of the First Amendment, believed that the most important school book was the Bible.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday, and we've got 2 more segments of good news. So, David, where do we want to go next?
Well, talking about Obamacare, there's a whole lot of people that have been running in the primaries against that, and they've been getting really good reception, but just kind of a shout-out to some really good folks. One of the guys we've had on this program from time to time is a guy named Gary Palmer out of Alabama. Gary runs the conservative and Christian think tank there in Alabama, the Family Policy Council, and he ran for Congress and got elected. There were 6 folks in that primary. He wins in the primary. So we now have put a guy in D.C. who has for 25 years been on the ground dealing with every conceivable kind of policy you can think of at the state level, that has tons of experience. He's not coming in as a new guy. He's coming in as the guy who's already learned the policy in so many areas and has led that state in the right direction so often. So really good to have him in. We also in Georgia picked up.
Hey, wait, bro, I got to ask you on that, because is the benefit of that not only that you have a guy with that experience, but normally you get somebody new in office and you're constantly having to help get them up to speed on issues. You're having to encourage constituents to call them on certain issues, because it's not that they're anti-biblical on an issue, they're just uninformed what the biblical perspective is on it, and maybe just get led the wrong way because of the other folks there in Congress. I mean, in this case, you got a guy that I don't think you and I have to worry about calling him once on an issue. He's going to be there on every one of our issues.
This is the axiom that we always use in politics: is you want to elect people you don't have to lobby. And this is a guy you're not going to have to lobby on issues. When you're talking about religious, moral, and constitutional issues, he's going to be great. If you want to lobby him on whether you think we should cut the capital gains tax by 3% or 3.001%, all right, call and lobby. But cutting the capital gains tax, he's going to be all over it. So on any issue that has that, and by the way, that is a biblical issue for those who don't know, Jesus has two entire teachings where you're supposed to reward profit makers, not punish them. And in America, the capital gains tax punishes those who make profit. It's a bad tax. But I use that as an example of that may be something you want to lobby, is the degree and the rate at which it occurs. But the issue itself, you're not going to have to lobby Gary at all on that. He will be someone like who's already been in Congress for a few years because he knows these issues in and out. He'll still, like other freshmen, have to learn some of the process and procedure, but that's easy to learn when you're not having to learn the issues as well. Yeah. And so this is a good one. We've got some of the same coming out of Georgia. Matter of fact, in Georgia, we have just elected in the primary in Georgia, Jody Heiss, who's a pastor out of Georgia, who is rock solid. I mean, he's a Black Robe Regiment kind of guy. And we talk about the Black Robe Regiment occasionally, but that's the American Revolution pastors who had a lot of backbone, and they were the first ones out to take on the British. And so Jody goes in with a lot of backbone, a lot of courage. That's the kind of guy you want. Barry Loudermilk also prevailed in his primary. Another guy who's proven himself at the state level, that you're not going to have to lobby him on these issues. And I'm just looking at the primaries, and we have really upped the quality of several of these folks who are in races. I've looked up in Michigan, for example, and guys like Tom McMillan, looks like he may win that race up there. Bruce Polkwin, who won in Maine. I mean, to have a pro-life, pro-marriage, conservative, economic conservative coming out of Maine, what a change that will be in the U.S. Congress from Maine. So there's just a lot of good races across the nation that are going in the right direction right now for those that are pro-family and constitutional conservatives. We're picking up the quality on a lot of good candidates that are replacing others.
That tells me how I've been way too busy the last few weeks. I did not realize that Jody Heiss had won out in Georgia. That's another great. I mean, I'd say the same thing about him. We just said about Gary, like you just did. I mean, that's that's very good news, and it's a reminder to our listeners. Sometimes everybody says, "Oh, they're all the same," and doesn't matter how involved you get, we still lose. Look, it's not true. When we do get involved, and sometimes it takes years. I mean, think about these guys, Gary and Jody. I mean, they've been in training, if you will, for decades to be ready to go do what they're going to go do in Washington now. So it's not an overnight thing. This should really excite people and make them realize this can happen across the country. Let's get dozens and dozens like this. You can see some big changes in America.
And by the way, for folks who say that there's no difference between them, you're watching too much CNN and too much MSNBC.
Yeah.
You're not listening enough to this program or some of the other programs. Yeah, you're going to find on MSNBC and CNN and those guys, you'll find Harry Reid standing right there with John McCain, and you'll say, what's the difference? But when you start seeing guys like Trey Gowdy, or you start seeing some of these others that the other networks do not cover, don't even think about saying there's no difference between them, because there's a lot of rock-solid guys, the guys we have on here, whether it be the Randy Forbes kind of guys or the Trent Franks kind of guys or the Louis Gohmerts or the rest, and that's what we've just added, is a whole bunch more folks that there is a difference between them and those folks who are not the constitutional and the pro-family conservatives.
Stay with us. It's Friday on WallBuilders Live, which means it's good news, and we've got time for more good news when we come back right here on WallBuilders Live. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty in Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
We're back here at WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. It's Friday, and of course that means more good news. And David always has good news. Yeah, I don't think you've ever run out that I can recall. We've been doing this for almost a decade, and every Friday you have plenty of good news. In fact, you never get to all of it. That's kind of a good thing.
Well, a lot of the good news I have to just throw away literally because we don't have time to cover it. And by the time we get to the next week, it's not new news anymore. It's old news. But I'm telling you, bro, there is no shortage of good news stuff across the country. The next piece is good news, at least for those of traditional values, those who hold to biblical values. As you look across the country, probably the movement that is going the fastest right now is the pro-homosexual movement. People keep saying, that the train's left the station, this thing's over. You might as well get used to it because that's the way it is in America. And that's really ridiculous because when you look at the states who have voted on it, for example, marriage, the gay marriage train has left the station, they're all saying. When you look at states who have voted on it, 31 states have voted for traditional marriage. Only 4 have voted against traditional marriage. So when it comes to the people voting, it's 31-4. I'm not sure the train's left the station when you have that number. If that were a football game, that's a crushing defeat. But when you start looking at the last 19 federal court decisions, the federal courts left the station because they have struck down the last 19 marriage amendments they've been challenged to. So if you're counting federal judges as reflecting the will of the people, which that'll be a first, if you count federal judges, you would think the perception is that the homosexual train has left the station. Not so. In those 19 cases, the Court of Appeals have not even weighed in yet, nor has this gone to the Supreme Court. To run a perception off federal district court judges is always a bad precedent when you've got nearly 1,000 lower court federal judges of some kind. So I'm saying all that to say there's a lot of hyperbole out there. There's a lot of people trying to make us think that this is inevitable. There's nothing we can do about it. And then on top of that, if you look at what you see in TV and media, I mean, Rick, you and I have talked about this before, but do you remember what the percentage of homosexuals, gays, lesbians in America are? Do you remember what the percentage was?
It's less than 2%, I know. I think it's 1 or 2%.
Well, it was 3.4%, and it had been at 3.4%, but the polling showed that most people thought it was at 25 to 30%. Wow. So the polling shows that most people think about 1 out of 4 Americans are gay or lesbian, homosexual lesbian. And in reality, it's 3.4%. Now,
but it's because they, like you were saying, they perceive that because they see it in television, and that is the percentage almost in television.
That's right. They perceive that. Well, here came this blockbuster study that everybody talked about. It's been all over the media. It's been front page news for the last week or so, and that is that the actual number of homosexuals in America has now dropped to, now these are gay and lesbian, male and female. It has now dropped to 1.6% of adults. So we've gone from 3.4 to 1.6% of adults, and we're being told the train has left the station. What's up with this?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, bro, too. We've already had several Patriot Academies this year, and I was real encouraged by the young people. I don't know if you got that same sense when you were there speaking, but they're getting stronger and stronger on the right side of this issue.
Yep.
Big shift even from last year. So I think the pushback from Ryan Anderson and the good folks that have come out with books and really defended the tradition of marriage as one man and one woman and why culturally that's good for us, I think it's having an impact.
It is having an impact. And here's another interesting one. This is also related to federal stuff. And, you know, one of the interesting things, because we're out of that sequester stuff now, they're back to writing budgets, which means that instead of doing extending the federal spending caps and continuing the continuing resolution, they're actually writing budgets. And so in the House now, the House is actually getting to decide what they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund. And guess what has been chopped fairly significantly in the House?
And I don't no idea.
The TSA.
Really?
The guys at the airport, yeah, the House wants that privatized. They want that out of government hands. And they are chopping back funding and agents and everything else on the TSA.
But how could they chop funding on that when there's only about 45 folks in blue shirts standing around doing nothing every time I go to the airport? I mean,
I know. It seems like you need more because when you have that many folks doing nothing, you need more people to manage nothing. And so, yeah, I'm sorry. That's facetious. But
I shouldn't say. We're both going to get detained next time we go through the airport.
You know, there's good folks there, but that's an inefficient program. The good news is they're chopping it in the House, parts of it.
It's not those people. It's not their fault. It's the fault of bureaucracy. Government's never going to run a program as good as the market would. So they're smart to privatize it. Absolutely. Well, lots of good news for you folks. We'll have more for you next week. If you'd like to grab some right now, you can go to wallbuilderslive.com and look in that archive section for some past Good News Friday programs. Thanks for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.